Hi, and welcome to the In the Cortex podcast. We are your hosts.
I'm Danielle Periconi.
And I'm Paloma Garcia, and we are the founders of In the Cortex, an online community with programs that show people the tools they need to change their lives through brain reorganization. No medication, just movement.
And when you get your brain out of survival mode and regulate your nervous system, you start to live in the fun, logical part of the brain, the cortex. Subscribe today and learn how to live your best in the cortex life. And now on to today's episode.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the In the Cortex podcast. I think we're kind of piggybacking off of a few things that we talked about last podcast. So we really want to talk today about conflict resolution, especially the way that we would love for it to occur in the perfect world in the micro school that Danielle is running and back home, with kids that are doing all this nervous system work. As many of you know, we have this wonderful school that Danielle, you can give some more details about it in a second. And it's something that we're looking to grow all over the world. And so we've had a lot of time recently to just talk about what's the philosophy behind it? How are we helping kiddos with conflict? What's different about our approach compared to most approaches that are out there? And I do think that there are a lot of differences. And I also think that there are a lot of similarities with a lot of people who study this stuff and who have been talking about it on social media, on other podcasts, et cetera, about how to truly get to the root of conflict. And I have to say, the first thing is that conflict is not a negative thing. We have to show kids that it's just part of life. Sometimes you're going to have conflict. Sometimes you're going to get annoyed at somebody. Sometimes things aren't going to work out exactly the way you thought they were going to. And there's always something we can learn from conflict, whether it's about ourselves, about the organization, about the other person, about our parents, about just whatever it is, right? Sometimes you just learn, oh, I don't really like when people talk to me like that. Great. Now I know that about myself, right? So I think that reframing it for kids is really cool because let's be real, kids get into fights. Like that's kind of a thing that every kid does, right? Because they're learning all these things, right? And their values are pushing up against other kids' values and their priorities and their way of interacting and their nervous systems, especially if there was dysregulated, bumping into somebody else's nervous system that's also dysregulated can sometimes create a bit of an explosion.
Yeah, it's funny because ever since I started becoming a part of a community, because that's what I really craved. I was a homeschooling mom. My son was 5 and my daughter was 2 at the time. And I just remember trying to sit down and doing schoolwork. And I was like, okay, I had conflict amongst my kids, right? Which I think that we all experience, right? You want your child to do something, maybe they're not ready for it or whatever the reason is. And then there's tears and it gets emotional. And then you're just like, you don't have tools, right? So what do you end up doing? You end up screaming, yelling, hitting, biting, whatever, slamming doors. I did not do that to my child.
No.
But there was definitely some yelling. I won't be, too innocent to not admit that. But when you become a part of a community, you realize that conflict is inevitable because, like you said, it's different value systems bumping up into each other, and it's trying to pull from resources and experiences we've had to try to figure out what to do next. And oftentimes, I was raised in a home where conflict was just really chaotic and emotional and loud and scary, and it wasn't fun. It didn't have a good resolve. And this isn't to throw shade at my parents, but they just didn't have tools. And most of our parents didn't have tools. And now that social media is as rampant as it is, there's so many plus sides to it because now we're all starting to learn new tools. We're starting to see that there's other options out there. And now it's so accessible to realize that there's a different way to handle something. So as I've been in this micro school, and this school came up just out of noticing what other little micro schools were doing and me going, okay, but I have tools and I can help bring these tools to these kiddos to help their day shift so things can get easier. And so creating this podcast, the goal here is to say, if I had a magic wand, how would I instill the perfect and ideal way? And obviously it's not perfect, but an ideal way of how do we navigate a community together? How do we navigate when something comes up and it's making you feel a certain way? It's making me feel a certain way. How do we get to a resolved, resolution? And so that's where I'm conflict is so great. And I said this in every micro school. I was like, how are we going to handle conflict? It's inevitable. We're human. We're going to have it. How are we going to handle it? And most people's response is, we'll talk about it. And I'm like, in an
Right.
ideal world where we all have regulation under our belt and we're all totally in our cortex, that's a great tool. But most of us, all of us, will have moments where we're dysregulated. And there's moments where it's like, well, what do you do when you're dysregulated, I'm regulated, or vice versa, or nobody's regulated? How do we work through it? And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So that's our goal, is to really help create a framework of how conflict can be resolved in the cortex. So we all come out with the growth that we really want to be able to bring into our lives and be able to have new experiences, to have new strategies for the future. And honestly, if our kids can learn these strategies at a young age, then they can practice it more, and then it just becomes second nature and it gets easier. That's the goal, right?
That's the goal, and that's why we always say the school is like a mini society, right? That's what it is. So you're helping these kids practice all these tools so they can use them when they go out into the world. Does that mean that the world, everybody's going to be regulated? No. That's why we're doing it the way we're doing it too, is sometimes you're going to come up with somebody who against somebody who is in their cortex. Sometimes you're going to come up against somebody who's really triggered and really in fight or flight and really angry and really, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think this is where it kind of serves as a great example of what it can look like in different spots in the world, right? But I would love to hear kind of like what I
Mhm.
know you have like some steps that you go through
Yeah.
in your day to day at school.
Yeah. And I'll give you a scenario because this is so universal. We're going to put it into the context of kids, but obviously, as an adult, you can use in a situation that's probably recently happened where there's adults involved. And it's a transferable experience no matter what it is. So, getting to the root of it, somebody does something that you don't like, or somebody takes something or wants something from you that you also want. And what's then the reaction to it? So, let's just say one kiddo, this happens a lot at our school where it's just one kid says another thing to another kid, and then that creates a reaction back. And it could be, just that instinctual reaction, which we all do, and then someone ends up getting hurt and crying, right? It doesn't happen often, but I feel like that is such a universal thing that happens across the board, especially for the littler ones. Like, I'm thinking more like 5 years and younger is where I really see it. Because think about it, developmentally, they don't have as many skills to be able to articulate, like, hey, I didn't like that, right? And then be able to like hold themselves poised and have a full conversation about it. So once that happens and a kiddo comes over crying, then the first step is to regulate. So this is oftentimes where we try to like talk to a child, and I'm guilty of this. Sometimes I'll be like, "Oh, what happened?" Right? Because we're just like, "Oh, I want to help save this moment, and I don't want to see any suffering happening any longer. Are you okay?" But in that moment, it's just like hold that child, give them a hug if you're allowed to, and let them sit with you. And you're regulated and calm. That will help them regulate. So there's that co-regulation piece. Then and that's really important. We're not talking, because if the more we talk, the more we can then engage that lower brain to then keep going. So it's important just to stay calm. Then the second step is once everyone's regulated. And sometimes at this point, like, depends on the kiddo, but some kiddos might need like you to sit there and hold space from them longer. And then maybe they need to go do a brain exercise to help them calm even more. So sometimes I'll see a kid and I go, hey, it looks like a creeping lap could really help you right now. Do you want to go with me and we'll go do a creeping lap really quick? Or, hey, do you want to try to do a brain hookup with me? And like, I'll show them how to do it. And I even like hold them and give them extra proprioception. So they're here and they're close and they can feel their body starting to ground and get regulated. So that's
And
always
sometimes
step
they won't
one.
even want you to get close to them. Sometimes they're
And
like, "Get away from me, I wanna be alone." That's
that's a
also
good
okay,
point.
right? And I
They
have
walk
to
away,
and
yeah.
it's important to keep in mind, this is different from a timeout. This is not a
Yes.
timeout, because this is a child saying, "This is too much for me. I gotta go over there and collect myself, and I'll be back," right? As long as they
Mhm.
understand and everybody understands that that's what's happening, then that's okay. Because sometimes people just need alone time. Like, I'm somebody who, if I'm in the middle of whatever, I don't want people coming up to me and hugging me even more. I'm like, "Get away.
Same.
I'm gonna go figure this out. I'm gonna be alone, take a deep breath, maybe go for a little walk, and then I'll be able to talk more. I'll feel more regulated, right? So I think it's
Love
also
it.
important to respect that each kid has their own kind of like preferred tools and preferred reactions in that situation.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that example. We were experiencing some people wanting to take, like, walks away, but it wasn't helping them shift the gear. It just kept them, like, perseverating on the thing. So then it was like, "Okay, that tool's actually not helping you out." So that's where it's like, what else can we do instead to help you shift? Because the goal is for you to go from that lower brain to the cortex. Because the cortex is where we're rational and we can have a conversation. Because that's the goal, is, like,
Exactly.
once we can start talking and understanding where you're coming from, where I'm coming from, then we can start to build that repair process. But if we're all stuck in the survival state, fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, we're not going to be able to make that progress because we can't have that full resolution happen in the cortex. So
Exactly.
this is why it's so important to understand how the brain's operating, because then you can understand, well, is that flight or is that taking a break? And like, when
Exactly.
is it still in survival, or when are we actually working towards getting into our cortex? So this is where that one person I'm referring to, I actually started to break that pattern of walking away. And I was like, Here's a different chance to do something different to help your system regroup." And then he started doing it. And then he started to sit, because sitting in the emotion can be so uncomfortable. We all
It's
know
so
this,
hard.
right? It's so
Totally.
hard to
That's
just
made
sit
it.
in
Yeah.
it. Right. And so some people are wired to like be able to sit in it. Some people are wired to fight through it. Some people are ready to run away from it. And so the goal is just to be like, okay, I can sit in this storm. And that's where the adult can come in to offer that co-regulation, be like, hey, I'm here with you. You're not
Hmm.
alone. I understand you're upset. It's okay to be upset. Let me sit with you as you work through all the cortisol and the adrenaline's coming through your system.
Exactly. You got to get rid of it, right? You got to get it out of your system. And also, these are tools that we teach when everybody's regulated, when we're in the cortex. So it's not like in the moment the
Right.
child is breaking down, they're screaming, they're crying, and you're like, okay, here's a new tool.
Yeah,
We're going
no.
to go for a walk. Definitely not, right? We want to make sure that they know them before, but that's why we say it, right? Because this is something that a lot of our in school program teachers do. So
Mhm.
they're going through the movements with the kiddos in their day to day. And so they'll remind them. And that's why we have those little flashcards, right? Like, here, go do this. I don't have to say anything. I'm not engaging your primitive brain. Here, reminder, you have tools. Because when we're in that primitive state, we just forget that we have access to any sort of logic and any sort of tools, right? That's why it often escalates, right? Especially like you said, when we're engaging with it. So if we
Yeah.
have those visual reminders too for kiddos, that's a huge one of like, here's your tool. And remember, they're not going to need that visual reminder for the rest of their lives, but they do need it now because they're still kids, right? So we still
Yes.
got to sometimes build kind of those supports into the school.
Yes, 100%. And as an educator, like being able to see in a parent, knowing that window when you see that your child starts to do that calming down breath, and knowing at the right time when to engage the cortex with a question. Hey, what do you think you need right now? Because if you say it too soon and they're still really worked up, it's just going to fuel the fire. If you say it too late, then they're like sitting there maybe, and there's no too late, honestly. It's more of like just knowing that moment. And I love Caesar Mill, and I think I've plugged him 15 times in this podcast, but he would always do it with the dogs. He'd always be like, the moment right there, he's just now calming down. Now's the moment to insert the
Oh,
whatever. And because he would always try to train the owner of the dog of like when to help them, like get the dog to switch gears. It's the same thing with kids. They need that redirect right at the right time. And that's where you can start to watch the signs in the body of like the deep breath. You can hear them. They can start to breathe a little
yes.
bit calmer. You start to watch their shoulders drop. You start to see their body melt a little bit more. Like that's when you
Mhm.
know that they're softening. And that's the time to be like, hey, what do you think you need right now? Do you need a hug? Do you need a creeping lap? Do you want to do a brain hookup with me? And sometimes they don't answer you. And then, like, sometimes you can have that window where you can grab them and like hold them and give them the hug. And then, because sometimes we don't know what we need, right? But if you have an adult that you trust and is guiding you, they're like, "Oh, I did need that hug. Thank you so much." So, this is where it is a little bit of a dance, but I know people who work with kids can see these moments and the shifts
Oh,
happening. So just
1,000%.
knowing that there's certain tools that you can insert at certain times to help the regulation happen smoother. And Paloma is
Exactly.
absolutely right. We are not bringing in complex topics when we're in the middle of, you know, losing it. And it's really hard to talk to anybody when they're in that state. So that's where we at our school, we're doing all these movements in the beginning of the day. We set the tone for the day. We do a reconnect to help set our subconscious up for the day. Then we do all of our brain movements. And the day does flow so well. And it's just like, and we really don't have very many like ups and downs in behavioral stuff. I mean, but we're human, so there's some stuff that happens. So after we're regulated, then I like to have everyone involved come over and we have just like an intimate sharing, like a trust circle. We're like, okay, now here's your chance to tell everybody like what your perspective was. What happened from your perspective, And it's so hard because there's times where one kiddo is sharing and the other one wants to interrupt. He's like, but, and I'm like, no, let him have the stage. You're going to have yours next. Because then it comes to him or her and then they get to share what happened. And so once we've all shared our perspective, I always tell kids there's 3 sides to every story: yours, his, hers, and then what really happened, right? From no emotional neutral ground. And once we've validated and we've talked about it and we want to make sure that their experience was validated. It doesn't mean that it was right or wrong. It just means it happened and that's how they saw it happening. And we give
Yes.
attachment to like what the feelings were. So it sounds like you were feeling frustrated. It sounds like you were feeling like you were being left out. It sounds like you were feeling hurt and rejected or whatever. So we get to the root of the feeling that that person experienced because it's so amazing how we all have different feelings coming up in the same situation, right?
1,000%. And I think, something that some people think sometimes with these strategies, and I know we're not the first person to ever say this. This
No.
is just something that we've kind of added the brain work in as well and kind of shaped it in a way that works for the way that we work with kids. But often people will think that by validating the emotion that the kid felt, then you're automatically saying that they're right and the other kid
Mm.
is wrong, right?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so this is where words are so important, right? So it's
Mhm.
where you say, instead of saying, this is where he hit you or like him hitting you must have hurt, you'll say, I can understand that you felt really, really sad that somebody was hurting you, right? So it's really important to just get to where the kid is. And of course, it's going to
Right.
depend on age, right? If they're really young, they might not know all the
Mhm.
different, they might not know that many emotions to put their finger
Mhm.
on, right? But they're also, when they're older, you can get a little bit more nuanced in what you're saying to them. But I think the most important piece is like, I see you have an emotion and you can have whatever emotion you want. You are free to have all the emotions at once if you want, right? Because I think that's such a huge piece that you were saying earlier is that adults or a lot of people that grew up the way that we grew up or in the time that we grew up, I should say, because we all grew up in different ways, there was a lot of like, "Stop crying. Why are you crying so much?" Or like,
Get
"It's
over
not that
it.
big of a deal." Or like, "Just move on, brush it off," right? And like,
Mhm.
I still see myself thinking that sometimes. I'm like, "Can I just move on? Like, it's not that oh my gosh."
Mm.
But it's like, because it wasn't something that was accepted, I think, for a lot of
Mhm.
us. And so there is a way of going a little too far with validating absolutely everything ever and blah blah. And it's not about that. It's not about again. It's not about feeling like you're feeding into the
Mm-mm.
drama of the situation, but it is about letting the kids know it's okay that they felt like that.
Yeah.
That's super super important because if not, we keep going with the conflict resolution, and the feeling just kind of is like I don't know. Like okay, I
Yeah.
guess whatever. I'm just gonna push it down next time.
Yes. I love that you said that because and I think that there's some pushback on the gentle parenting that's been going on in today's world because it's gone too far. And I think we always swing a pendulum from one end to the next, right? We all grew up with like no feelings and now it's like every tiny thing has a feeling. And we're like, let's meet in the middle, right? It's like you're upset. I see a physiological reaction happening from your body. Let's identify that because that is important to start noticing. And this is something I talk about with the kiddos at the school is like when you have feelings in like your gut, like that's your like guidance system. That's your protection mechanism. That's your neuroception, right? That's your interoception. That is an actual sensory system that we want you to tune into because it's telling you information that is helping you navigate. And if you ignore it, how many times have we ignored that gut feeling and been like, I should have
Millions.
listened to my gut, And now when people tell me, you just told me this today, you're like, do what your gut feels. I'm like, my gut was like literally so ignored my whole life that I'm like, oh my gosh, I just had this really crazy connection. I don't know if we've already said this, but I'm like, and all of my stuff is in my gut right now. Like I have massive leaky gut and like all these things going on. And it's like
Oh,
your third brain, right? Your actual
yes.
brain, your heart, and then your gut. And I'm like, well, that's actually interesting making that connection because I'm starting to get in touch with my intuition more and starting to like really
Mhm.
trust it. And I'm also healing my gut. Oh my gosh, that's actually wild. Side note. So once we've validated the experience and we see that, and here's the deal, there are times where I have literally seen a kid pick up a rock and chuck it across the yard. And that is where we're like,
Nice.
absolutely not. And my demeanor will get a little bit more stern because I need that child to understand that that's a never ever. Like that could actually put someone in a hospital
Yeah.
and it's not okay because I'm not an adult walking in the world throwing rocks at just any open space because I don't know where it's going to land, right? And so we do have to understand that there are behaviors that are related to the brain, there are behaviors related to our subconscious beliefs, and then there's behaviors that are like actually like never evers and you're testing boundaries, and I have to share where the boundary is immediately. And it's
Exactly.
interesting how we all navigate those ones so differently. You can tell when there's been boundaries instilled and that is a value system and that child responds is like, okay, got it. Or like a child responds to a boundary and they're like mortified and scared and they like go into withdrawal, right? So it's interesting how we're all being exposed to different things when we're in a
Yes.
community and we're trying to
Well,
find that common ground.
100%, but I think also what we said, we just made a video about this last week about how the boundary is so important for the brain. The brain needs to know what the structure is and what the boundary is and where to go. And that's what gives the nervous system safety to be able to do the things that you want kids to do in a school, to be able to learn, to be able to connect, to be able to
Yeah.
be
Have
silly and
fun.
funny
Yeah.
and have,
Yeah.
yeah, and like make friends and just, just
Yeah.
truly be
Live.
themselves. Right. And so that's where, and I'm sure a lot of people remember, like, I remember some of my favorite teachers were actually the most stern. They were super fun and super cool, but they were also the most stern because I knew how far I could push with them. So I wasn't always like, kind of trying to play with that boundary or part of me trying to test it, right? Like that wasn't even a thing anymore because I knew where it was very clearly, right? So that's also really important for the nervous system.
Oh, I love that you said that because it's true. Kids love structure. They don't need like a militant constant reminding of don't do that, don't do this. But they need to know where that boundary is because when they know where a boundary is, then they don't have to push for it. They don't have to do those behaviors that seek it, right? To find out how far can I go. And I love getting to see where all of our boundaries are. And I come in on day one being like, hey, I'm your teacher. And it was actually a joke for a while that I was the trench bull from Matilda. And it was like, I could have fun with it. But I was also like, hey, when I mean business, I mean business. And I need you guys to listen because we do live in a community. We do live in a society where there has to be order. Because imagine if nobody listened to any of the rules, we'd be driving however we wanted to drive. And as I was just sharing some stories about people actually driving on the wrong side of the road. And I'm like, see, they don't know where the boundaries are. Like, and that's dangerous. Like, that person's going
Exactly.
to go to jail, right?
Exactly.
So we're just trying to help kids understand these things because here's the deal the lesson now as a kid is so much cheaper and easier versus when you're
Yes.
older. It just gets way
1000%.
expensive and more draining and just harder as you get older to learn
Hmm.
about these boundaries.
Hmm.
So, once we've gone through, validated it, now the next step 4 is like, let's get to the root of it and let's turn this into what we call a reconnect. So, for example, the one kiddo that pushed the other kid, he's like, well, I felt like you cut in front of me and it was my turn next and you weren't listening to me. So it's like, okay, so you weren't feeling heard. Yeah, I wasn't feeling heard. Okay, I'm heard. That's your reconnect. Okay. And the other kid that was pushed was like, yeah, I felt violated. Like I didn't know why he pushed me. And I felt like, he was being mean to me and it made me feel like I didn't matter. Okay, there's your reconnect. I matter. And so then we get to the root of each kiddo having their own experience. And then we do the reconnect. And I kid you not, like these kids just like do the reconnect with, and this is all happening in like maybe 10 minutes. Like
Yeah.
it's pretty quick. It's like depending on how fast the regulation takes, but since we do so much brain work, the regulation is fast. Like, it's not
Well,
sobbing
right,
for
because
hours.
they have a
Yeah.
solid foundation to come back to. They're not like, "Whoa," yeah,
No,
totally.
it's
Of
such
course.
a quick turnaround. So then we do a reconnect. Once we've all done our reconnect, I offer them, I'm like, "Do you guys wanna high five each other? Do you want a knuckle bump? Do you wanna give each other a hug? How do you wanna handle it?" And then they just come up with, like, a high five, handshake, whatever. Some of them hug, and then they go back and play. And it's like, okay, that was 10 minutes. And now we each got out of it some really amazing learning. It didn't have to be this negative
1000%.
experience. And I always will tell parents at the end of the day when they come to pick up, I'm like, hey, this is what happened. And here's what we did. And here's the reconnect. Sometimes the reconnect doesn't happen. And so I share with the parents, like, hey, this is where you can go explore some more stuff at home to try to get to the root. Because sometimes kids don't want to share. They're like, I don't know why I did it.
Right. Yeah.
And when you're in that space, you're not gonna sit there and hammer it in and be like, "Tell me why you decided to act that way." Sometimes they just haven't connected the dots yet, and they're like, "I need to go process it." And I will tell you the best time to get your child to open up is when you're laying in bed, and obviously, if you're putting them to bed, you're lying there with them, and then that's that window when you start to dip into, like, the theta state, and it's, like, going into that calming. I think that's the theta state, right? Yeah. And, you start to you start to sink into, like, okay, I can start to let go. My subconscious can now kind of float up to the surface and kind of open up
Mhm.
some windows and kind of share what's going on with me. And that's where you get really good information. And then that's when parents are like really able to open up and hear what kids have to say. My kids
Totally.
like to open up when we're driving in the car, we're all strapped into seatbelts and we have nowhere to go, and that's where
Yeah.
conversations flow. So it just depends on your kiddo and when they start to really feel like they can open up to you, but making it instead of like an interrogative, like, "Why did you do that?" It's like, I wonder what you were thinking." Or one of
Yes.
my favorite tools is to say, and I do this like fictional person of like, this mom came up to me the other day and her son had this thing happen and it's the same situation. Why do you think he did that? And when you put it on another kid, they're like, oh, he probably was feeling blah, blah, blah. And then they'll literally just share what was going on with them. But since it wasn't directly on them, they can share it easily. So there's some cool tips and tools in there of like, I'm sure you can go find all those on Instagram of like ways to get your kiddos to open up. But that's the process that we do at school. And it's an effortless experience. And the more we practice it, the easier it gets. And it's something then that we are deciding as we've learned about this school that this should be something we instill throughout. Like, we really want to encourage more parents to come into this because if they can learn these tools, it changes the conversation, right?
Totally, and it creates the same feeling at home of safety, of regulation, of knowing that there's somebody there that's gonna listen to you and that there's no judgment, that there's just, this happened and we're gonna figure out why and we're gonna figure out how to feel better, right? And how to maybe not have it happen again if it's not something that I was really happy about, that I didn't really love. And it's just more of like conflict becomes more neutral. And so that's also something that's gonna help kids want to share more is conflict is neutral. It just happened. Oh yeah, it's something that happened. Okay. Just like I had a sandwich for lunch, also this happened at school. Right. So it's not like this thing where it's like, okay, now we have to really make it a huge, huge thing of their day, a huge part of their day and talk about it for hours and hours because remember, kids, especially the younger they are, humans in general, but kids even more, we learn through experiencing things, through experimenting and feeling them and doing them, right? So talking, of course, is a wonderful tool. I'm not saying not to talk, but there also has to be some like action through it and they have to like be able to truly live what it is and what it feels like, right? To get through that conflict, to get back to that regulated state, right? To have that connection moment with their peer, with the parent, with the teacher, right? That's what the nervous system is actually learning from, right? Is those moments. So when we have the parents doing the program at home, it is a completely different scenario because we can just say, "Hey, make sure you guys do this and that, these exercises at home tomorrow and do this reconnect." And the person's like, great, cool, I'm going to do it too. And then also, when you have really connected parents that love this stuff, which is a lot of our members, right? They'll say, this thing happened to my kid with their peer. And it reminded me of something happened when I was little. And that's where
Mm.
we go, oh, okay, cool. So what's coming up for you? Because that's why it's happening, right? It's to teach everybody in the family something. And so that I love that part. And we have a lot of members that share that kind of stuff in our app in the community where it's like, this thing came up for me and I realized that it wasn't about my kid, it was actually me, right? Putting pressure on this situation or getting really triggered with this thing that my kid maybe didn't even notice that much, but then I made it into a thing. And so now it's a thing for them at school or at this after school class or whatever, right? So I think that's the coolest piece is when the parents are also super in tune with this stuff because, like you said, it just goes even faster.
Yeah, I think nailing that point, you were bringing up the neutrality of what a conflict can be. And the only time it's not neutral is when it's charged and when it has an emotional charge to it, right? And so for me, not being, let's just say the two kids involved or three or four kids involved, and they're not my kids at that moment, there's no charge for me. So I can keep it neutral. So I can keep that regulation happening at school. But I will promise you, Paloma witnessed it 3 years ago when you were visiting, and I'll never forget, like,
Yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
that moment. I remember walking I've said this so many times. I walked out of the bathroom and I was just like, "I need help," and it was just like this cry out for, like, little Danny doesn't have tools and she's
Yep.
stuck, and she just wants someone to come in, sit in the storm with her, and get her out of it. And when you're in with your kids, it can become charged when you have a lot of wounds.
Mhm.
And when you haven't looked at all the things that have brought something up for you at some point in your life, and
Well, you don't
there's
even
no, like,
have to have a lot of wounds. Just if you have a wound that is
any
being
wound.
touched in your child, like, that's it, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, it was like that feeling of, "Oh my gosh, this is so hard." And I kept saying that so much. I was just like, "This is so hard." And you finally got to the point where you're like, "Stop saying things are hard because you're just making them hard." And I was like, "But you don't get it. It's because I just wanted someone to sit in the storm with me because I didn't have anyone doing that with me." So anytime my kids started to get dysregulated, I joined the storm. I was like, "We're all getting there. Let's get crazy." And it ended up with like me yelling and just being like, this sucks. Like, there's no other words to
Of
describe it. It's
course.
a tough
Yeah.
feeling. But then once I was like, "Girl, you're telling people to do brain work. Go do it yourself." And the minute I started doing the brain work regularly, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I forgot. This is regulation. It's so much
Yeah.
easier." Like, you can just take a deep breath. Your child doesn't want soap in their hair when they're in the bathtub. Okay. What do you want to do? Do you want to put it in or you want me to put it in? And you can come up with
Yeah.
options and solutions quicker. It's so amazing how much quicker the flow of life happens. And so once I was able to, like, just stop joining the storm and I could start being the regulator, because I finally healed that little wound in me. It's actually a big wound of just little Danny so scared. Like you said, safety. I never felt safe. Once I finally started feeling safe inside of myself, then what do you think I can mirror back? Safety to my kids. And so this is where the conversation at home started to shift. All of a sudden, it went from, help me, I don't know what to do," which if you're a parent and you're listening to this and you feel like that, I get it, but it fuels your kids' fears. It makes them go, "Oh my gosh, you don't know what to do? Well, I'm a kid, you're the parent. What do you mean? Like, who's in charge here?" And that scares them even more. So again, it goes back to safety for all of us. Then once we're all able to feel safe, then it's like, okay, now we can start to talk about it. And I was able to unpack the things. And then all of a sudden, like, just things started just getting, and I don't want to say miraculously because it wasn't a miracle. It was truly neuroplasticity. It was me literally changing my brain, picking a new connection to use. Once I started
Yes.
doing more reconnects of all these things coming up, I was like, oh my gosh, I am a confident mom. I can do this. My children's behavior is not a reflection of me as a parent. Like, I started
Mhm.
really digging deep into so many things that were coming up because our kids highlight so much of our stuff. Then I was able to separate myself and I could be like, my kid's allowed to struggle and I don't have to make it about me. It's literally their experience, but I can be there to support them. And that was a huge
Exactly.
breakthrough. So
Yes.
that's the thing is, now when my kids have a struggle, instead of me joining in and being commiserating on like, "You're right, that sounds so hard. Oh my gosh, that must be so difficult to do." And that just keeps them stuck in that victim state. I look at my son and daughter, I go, "Well, what are you learning?" Just changing, like you said, the wording, just shifting it. It's like I'm still identifying that that's not easy, but I'm also giving you the option to move forward and on. And what are you learning from that interaction? And
Exactly.
most kids, when they're still stuck and new in it, my son used to be like, "Nothing. This is the worst." And I was like,
Yeah.
"I get it, but I'm gonna ask you that question over and over until you find one tiny little thing that you're learning. Because the minute your brain gets like one little hint of something is like a glimmer of hope of I'm learning
Yes.
something, it can then move forward."
Exactly. Yeah. 100%. I think that's the most valuable thing that brain work really gives us is that the ability to shift from everything is so hard, I don't like this, to, oh, actually, I'm sure that's why that happened. Now I understand. There was a lesson in there for me. Or, oh, maybe that's actually not as hard as I thought it was. Like little pieces like that. I think that's what it gives everybody that does it. Kids, adults, teachers, anybody.
Well, think
You
about
do the
it.
right
Like if you're someone that walks around in the world saying everything is happening to me, you're in survival mode. You're reacting to everything. Literally, survival mode is just you react to the stimuli. And of course, that feels like, and that's real. That's actually what is happening. You are having to react to the stimuli, which makes you turn on the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And the minute you stop having those be your go to reactions and you start to respond, then you pull on the cortex. And then once you're in the cortex, you have options, you have ideas, you have different ways of handling things. You can have empathy, you can have all these higher functions that you don't have in survival mode. So that's why we push so hard for not only just the kids to do the movements at school, but also for the parents to join us. And obviously, we can't force you. We just
Mm-mm.
really encourage it. And we're like, if you want to join this community that's really based in the idea of breaking free, thinking differently, and being a part of something that is truly changing education for our children at the root level, that means you got to join us on all aspects of it. You can't just drop them off and like say, here you go, do your magic 2 days a week. And then all of a sudden everything's easier, right? Like we need parents to be involved. And that's one thing that I'm like really excited for next year is like creating workshops, creating ways where parents can come in with questions, opening up that space for it's okay to have these conversations. This is totally
Yes.
normal. This is all a part of the journey. We're all in this same space together, and there's no one who's better than anybody else. But we just need to all take that leap into like, okay, it's unknown. It's going to stir some stuff up. I'm a little bit scared, but I know that this is going to help my child or children, right? That's
Yep.
the
That's
goal.
the goal at the end of the day. Exactly.
hmm So, if any of this sounds like it's resonating with you, it's definitely a fit, right? Of let's join the movement. Paloma and I are really on a mission. She's wanting to push more of the schools in Mexico City. And it's something that pops up so much in our Instagram of people wanting to know more about like, what is this micro school doing? Why is it different?
Yes.
And honestly, it's because we're rooted in the nervous system first. And once we address that piece and like learning and all the amazing stuff just gets to it's how we were supposed to live.
Yes. Exactly.
Like, we're not making anything up that hasn't already been there. So that's the movement, and we are excited that you're here listening to us. So we'll see you
Thank
on the next
you.
one. Bye.
Bye.